the soul of a business is profit and shareholder return, right? The purpose of the business, the soul of the business is not love and kindness. It's growth and profit. It is very, very hard to usurp it. The people when we're dealing with multinational business who are calling the shots are shareholders. It's people who aren't even actually involved in the day-to-day of the business, but they are really the ones where everything becomes answerable. To restore loving kindness as the principal purpose of that organization is very difficult to do.
You're listening to Learning How to Live, the podcast about what happens after you wake up from the life you were told to want. I'm Quinn Stainfield-Bruce, and 6 years ago my best attempt at life had failed. Now I'm learning how to rebuild work, love, health and self-worth, and I'm inviting you to learn alongside me. Let's get into it.
Okie dokie. Welcome back to Learning How to Live, the Humanness episode, episode 9. Not entirely sure where this episode's going to go, but I am here with my brother-in-arms, Axel, my business partner in Humanness. Anyone who's followed me at all will be familiar with the business that we launched a couple of years ago called Humanness. And if you've been following, then you may be curious as to what it's all about and, you know, what we do and what drives Axel and I as the two co-founders in this what feels sometimes like an endless pursuit to restore human qualities to the heart of business. But there's interesting things happening in the world right now. There's interesting shifts happening. And even though the last 2 years from 2023 onwards has been a bit of a struggle in adoption of our radical vision, it seems that things are really starting to change. And so I guess for Axel and I, it felt like a good time just to have an honest conversation, completely unscripted and even more unprepared, just around all things humanness and ourselves and our motivations. And I guess what we're seeing, I guess almost like one of our morning meetings, Axel, where we just check in and and have a chat and see where it goes. But would you like to introduce yourself, my brother?
With pleasure and good day, everyone. Axel Ferreyrolles. I am 52 years old, married and 2 kids who are grown up, 20 and 22. It's important because I've decided to leave a large corporation to pursue the Humanness journey with Quinn. And I did it because I felt I was ready to do it personally, but also because the family felt safe. And therefore, I was ready to take on that challenge that Humanness represents. And I feel like today I'm very energized on the one hand because I know it's the right time. And I'm a little bit depressed because of all the discussion I had with so many people. And I realize that what's going on in corporations, organizations is sad. It's sad because we have lost that humanness and that the AI trend is not trying to help on that. So I know we are at the right place, Quinn, to do what we have to do. I know it's not the main current, the mainstream, at least not from what I hear, but I also feel a bit sad for all the people working in those corporations, organizations who are suffering and really suffering. I discussed this morning with someone and we heard violence, we heard psychological unsafety, burnout. We realized things have changed, but not necessarily for the right direction. So I'm happy to discuss with you because there is lots to be said, lots to be told, and trying to understand where the world is going, where the organizations are going, and where humans are going.
Yeah. It's we've been on this journey trying to figure out our messaging and where we fit into the world. Actually, I want to revisit some of the stuff that we were speaking about in the early days, which was like the Gallup stats. 91% of people in the UK want to quit their jobs and, low engagement numbers. people just not wanting to be at work. It's mental health, addiction rates, burnout, all of these things. I saw a post yesterday. There's a lot of people talking about well-being. I'm just going to speak where my truth on this right now, because I've done some profound reflection around well-being at work. There is like it's just not. I don't. It's not going to work. Here's what I think. I'm not going to tar you with this brush, Axel. You can either agree or not. It's okay. I don't think well-being at work will work. I don't think it's relevant. I don't think it's the job of an employer to care for the well-being, to be responsible for the mental and physical health of an individual. Like, this is, let alone spiritual health. It's not the employer's responsibility for an individual's physical, mental, or spiritual health. Right? In fact, if my journey through addiction and transformation and recovery has taught me anything, it's that until an individual is totally willing to want to change, there is nothing, hell or high water, that can be done to influence that change. And so when you see this huge, well-meaning push for well-being at work, the millions and perhaps billions that are being spent on initiatives to try and create this idea of well-being at work, I find it so frustrating, and I feel for those who are championing it, because I know that it can't really work. It can't really work because the environment in the workplace is not one that is conducive to receive the change being proposed by well-being initiatives. The environment is not receptive to it. And so it's like waves crashing against rocks. So it's not that. So for me, it's two-pronged. And I know, just diving down this rabbit hole completely off the cuff, but it's pertinent because I saw this post yesterday I want to talk about. On the one hand, I don't actually think it's the organization's responsibility. On the other hand, it can't work whilst the environment is not receptive to wanting the change. So the post that I saw yesterday was, an ex Big Four consultancy well-being person, who's championing well-being, again with all of the best intentions. It's full support of the cause, and they asked a question like, what has to happen for businesses to start taking this seriously? Because the point being made is that they're not. And I was like, of course they're not. I said what has to happen is either there has to be a major crash, a human crash, which I believe is impending. Also, all of the layoffs going on, wherever you look, the psychological pressure, the disengagement numbers from Gallup, all of the stats are there that there is a human crash coming. And when things crash hard enough, people will be receptive to change. And I said the second thing that could happen to bring about this shift of consciousness is that leaders become more conscious themselves, not driven by the organization, but because they are going on their own journey of awakening. You and I have been on journeys of awakening, and I think it's important for us to share and talk about consciousness on this. To anyone who cares to listen, might be pertinent. But if leaders are waking up, becoming conscious, and let's maybe talk about what that means in a second, then they are going to want to bring their energy into their organizations. If leaders are currently unconscious, then there is very little that can be done, I believe, to make them receptive to bringing about the change required to solve low engagement, burnout, mental health, and all of the other things. But if they have woken up, then they will be. And the good news is that people are waking up globally on a scale never before seen. There is this consciousness happening, and we're seeing it with leaders that we meet, and we have experienced it ourselves. I believe it's kind of the shift that has happened that is paving the way for humanness to really emerge, humanness as a business to emerge. And it's good because it means that people within organizations are wanting to bring about this change, are wanting to create the environment where transformation becomes able to take root and to expand. So yes.
There are many things, Quinn, in what you said. I would like to bounce on one or two things. Based on what I've seen in large corporations, what we have discussed on small and mid-sized corporations as well, I'm fully with you that it's not the objective of the company to take care of the well-being, because that's not the purpose. If you ask, even this morning, people from the corporation said, listen, we are here to make money and revenue and profit for a simple reason. We want the organization to survive. And we as entrepreneurs, of course, want to generate some revenue. It makes total sense. The question is, how do you do it? The second thing is, although you're not responsible for the well-being of people, you're responsible for not creating illness into people, right? So it's on a continuum. You have well-being and bad being, let's say, and there is a responsibility here on the leadership and on the frontline sales managers, which I consider crucial to this. Oh, I have interesting balloon. I don't know how I've done that. It was nice. But this, I think, is also important. It's not because you're not in charge of well-being that you shouldn't take care of humans. And I'm wondering if people currently have the tools, the training, the level of consciousness or reflection to give them the ability to do it, especially under pressure. Because what we see, Quinn, which is so impressive when we talk to all the large corporations as we do, and also the small, medium-sized companies, is the amount of pressure, survival mode coming from the outside. It's a crazy time. And not everyone is equipped currently to sustain the pressure. And when you are under that pressure, as you know, we are moving into the fear factor. Another fear factor and survival, taking care of humans is the least of your problem. Because your focus goes on survival, meaning money and revenue and profits. Because if you don't make that, the rest will collapse. So let alone keeping your people in the corporation. And I guess we need to think, how could we help the organizations, the team, the leaders, the managers, and of course also the people to create that space that can sustain that pressure? Because otherwise the system will crash under. That's what I sense at the moment. People, even leaders, are not equipped. They're suffering too much, suffering from that fear. And that fear gets them into that high beta brainwaves, high stress, flight and fight mode. And of course, they take the wrong decisions. So at the moment, I'm wondering, how could we help leaders, managers, and teams to create that environment and to create that space where you can be well, even though the environment is a bit crazy, not to say totally scary.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that before we even get into that, there's some bigger issues. Like my response to what has to happen is that we have to restore soul. Well, we have to restore soul to business, and people like Rishad Tabakawala, who was, very, very senior at Publicis Group, on the data side, on the tech side, he wrote a book called Restoring the Soul to Business a few years ago. The idea that this is required isn't just, me on my spiritual journey thinking we need to bring soul back to business. Well-established people have acknowledged this. And but what is soul? What do we mean by that? And for me, and I'm going to go on a spiritual kick on this for a second, because soul, divinity, these things are rooted in things like love and kindness. Right? Even if we want to look at it from a Buddhist perspective, at the core, loving kindness. Right? You have a beautiful Buddha behind you right now. Right? At the center point of Buddhism, loving kindness. You know, Judaism, there's a prayer called the Shema, and it's the most important, one of the most important prayers in Judaism. The first paragraph is love, 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 love. Right? So at the center, I mean, you know, just 2 examples, I could go on. But fundamentally, spirituality, divinity at the core is love and loving kindness. Right? So if we're talking about the restoration of soul and we're being spiritual about the concept of soul, well, then we're talking about the restoration of love and kindness. Now, we start talking about putting love and kindness at the center of business. Like, I'm trying to think about how different people would react to that idea. You know, on the one hand, we can sit here and go, well, that's a lovely idea, but will never work. Or we could be like, well, yeah, that would be nice, but again, can't see how you do it. Or it then starts falling into this sort of, I don't know, almost feels like it could fall into this well-being camp. This idea of this sort of bolt-on that we need to figure out how to, you know, bolt onto the way people do things. It's like, well, maybe we do a loving kindness training, you know, like, you know, we'll do, you know, bring people into a meeting room for an hour a week to learn how to be loving and kind. And you know, I could see how that's where people's brains could go. What's required is really far more revolutionary than that, right? It's that at the heart of everything that the business does or tries to do, it acts through the lens of loving kindness, right? The problem, the obstacle to that, because it's actually not a hard thing to do. It's actually not a hard thing to do. If you brought a group of human beings together and really connected with the energy of loving kindness, as human beings, we crave it. You don't need to give us much of an excuse to connect with loving kindness. If you create a space where we can be loving and kind to one another, there's very few things that feel better than that. So as human beings, it's not like we're actually resistant to it. We're not. The problem is in business is that the soul of a business currently, on the whole, is profit and shareholder return. Right? The purpose of the business, the soul of the business is not love and kindness. It's growth and profit. Whilst that is the soul, it is very, very hard to usurp it. And the thing is, the people when we're dealing with multinational business who are calling the shots are shareholders. It's people who aren't even actually involved in the day-to-day of the business, but they are really the ones where everything becomes answerable. So when you have the people in charge really disconnected from the day-to-day, and the purpose, the incumbent purpose, being one of profit and shareholder return, to restore loving kindness as the principal purpose of that organization is very difficult to do. Right? Now, this is the thing though, because you could easily say to me, well, Quinn, but the purpose of business is growth and profit. We all work so we can make money so that we can, you know, pay mortgages and have a nice life and we can look after our families and have protection. You know, and a point of a business is to make money so that we can make money. So why would loving kindness be a thing? And this is where well-being and various other voices, it's landing on deaf ears. And even Gallup and actually McKinsey and Accenture, they've all done reports that support this. is that when you restore human qualities to the day-to-day operations, the result is actually growth, right? So the thing that the shareholders want, which is profits and growth, would actually be delivered sustainably by restoring soul in the form of love and kindness and human qualities to the core of operations. In doing so, we then get to permeate the impacts of people living or working from a place of loving kindness across the rest of the business. The whole ecosystem of the organization gets to heal, gets to thrive energetically from having that core purpose, from having that brought to life, right? And this is what we're trying to do. The thing that we get that I don't think many people do is that the way that this happens is we have to get the environment receptive to the change and the transformation. And what you were talking about when you were saying the fear culture, that everyone today, there is so much fear in the world, whether people are conscious of it or not, right? If you are not worried about job security right now, if you're not worried about the geopolitical climate, if you're not worried about whatever wars going on in the world, if you are not worried about the climate, if you are not worried about the future of your children and the well-being, if you are not worried about AI, if you are not worried about screens and the way they're impacting everybody, I mean, to be honest, if you're not worried about it in some way, I mean, what's the secret? I mean, maybe you are in a monastery, in the Himalayas, just completely cut off, because there's so much to be afraid of. But on top of that, in big organizations where you have the modus operandi is let's just lay people off to sustain our share price, the human impact energetically is so painful for people. And it's having such an adverse effect that to come in and say, well, do you know how we're going to fix this? Love and kindness. It's like, there's no way anyone would be receptive to that. People want tried and tested, left brain solutions. So how do we move people? We move people. Well, that's the point, is that we have to move people from fear to creativity, to receptive, to being receptive, right? And this is where the humanness model comes in.
There are very interesting points around what you just said, Quinn, which is we need to change the belief systems that people hold that love and kindness is not the solution and will not work. Because that's what they think. And this morning, again, I got that amazing discussion with this lady who is extremely creative. And she has been told, we don't need your creativity, we need governance. Now, we are still working on a model that comes from the early 20th century, where we believe that a vertical structure following very clear task description with processes and execution is the most effective way of working. What we know, according to all the latest research, that this model is not going to last because it's not flexible and robust enough to face the level of transformation that is coming. It's optimized, like a Formula One, but it's not robust enough to survive big disruptions. And people will have to change the way of thinking. The second one is humans as that adaptive structure within the organization that can adapt while organizations like computers or AI will not be able to do it. The human is much more adaptable, much more creative. And we need to make sure that the leaders see this. But again, when you hear from someone this morning say, we don't need your creativity, we need governance, so please just execute.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
It means that in her role, she could have stayed exactly in the box of her job description, or she could have moved to something bigger. And she has been asked in that case to be stick and locked in her box according to her KPI and remit of governance and legislation. Well, she wanted to bring the company to a different way of working, different collaboration with the partners, the customers, different ecosystem, social impact, ecological impact, and she was asked not to do that. And the reason why she was asked not to do that, because the board thought that they were under threat in a survival mode. So all what is considered as transformation, as on top, cannot be accepted by the organism that is currently struggling for survival. And everything I hear at the moment is that people believe it's on top. Right? The reason why, when you mentioned well-being, you mentioned initiatives of well-being. An initiative is something that comes from the outside in. It comes from the outside as an artificial construct where we start and say, now, Quinn, we're going to do well-being, so we get mindfulness. Okay? If you want, it's not mandatory, by the way, it's optional. You can come to a 2-day training where you're going to learn how to breathe in and how to be mindful. It's an initiative. It's not embedded within the DNA of the organization. It's not believed to be transformative to that extent by the board. It's not a way for the human resources to take care of their people so that the people believe that they have been taken care of. And the problem is exactly that. It's not in the DNA. The question then is, as you said, if the purpose is to make profit, and that becomes the sole purpose, then it's very difficult to start changing the way you behave and to go as deep as you can on the behaviors through the belief systems, so that at the end, taking care of people so that they feel well, so that motivation increase, so that creativity increase, so that performance increase. This can only be done if I believe in this.
This is my point there, exactly, is that well-being for me is reactionary, right? It's treating symptoms. Now, people in well-being would probably argue that it's actually about prevention, right? But if it's not embedded into the DNA, like you say, then it can't possibly be about prevention. It is about treating symptoms, and it's almost, there's a sort of insidiousness around it, which is like, there will be a well-being infrastructure so that when you start collapsing, we can get you fit again and throw you back in, right? When what we're talking about here is actually changing this from the core on the way out, from the way out. And this is, again, the point I really want us to try and get very clear on, or figure out how to be really clear about, which is that humanness is, we have, like, it's not about changing, like us knowing how to change their processes to make them more human. It's not about us having clever ways for departments to work better together. We don't have an opinion on that. What we want to do is create environments where the human beings who are already in these teams, in these departments, are interacting with each other with love, kindness, honesty, creativity, vulnerability, just as the day to day. Because when they start doing that from a place of creativity and flow, as opposed to from a place of fear, just everything gets better. The stats, more creative, more productive, staff retention is better, everything is better. But we know this just experientially. It's like, if we talk about the neuroscience for a second, about what's going on, I think a lot of people are waking up to this as well. I am of the belief that we are fundamentally made up of energy. Right now, I understand the science and I understand the pseudoscience. I understand the spirituality. But I also know what happens when we use things like sound or breathing exercises or some form of ancient ceremony, what happens to our brain waves. When our brain waves go from high beta, which is where they are when we're afraid, to a place of alpha and theta, when we're when we're creative and comfortable and in flow. And we know that these techniques do that, and I guess there's more and more people, I think, waking up to understanding this, right? And I think actually, if I celebrate well-being for something, it is the awareness of stress, and it is the awareness of mindfulness, and it is the awareness that there are techniques that can influence you on a physiological level, right? Because in many ways that does pave the way for some of our processes that we bring into business, which are slightly more maybe right brain, whether it be things like drumming or sound baths or whatever. But it's like almost like, well, people now understand that sound impacts us. I think people starting to understand that that there is now scientific evidence behind what used to be seen as a bit weird and spiritual is definitely paving the way for us who now make our argument that by implementing these processes in business, you can move teams of people from a place of high beta brainwave fear to a place of creativity and flow in alpha and theta. And this is I guess the use case we're trying to bring to the world, because it's Axel, you I have so much love and appreciation and gratitude for you, brother. And like, you are my brother in arms, and I mean this with all my heart. Where I'd be without you. But it's like you spent decades in multinational consultancy and software, hardware, and you understand operations, transformation, process on a very, 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 very senior level. And here I'm coming in, and albeit I've had many years experience of working with multinational brands, from my own spiritual awakening through my journey of recovery, and then trying to bring that magic into business, and we've come together, and we do have this bizarre use case which we're building and sharing with people, which is, here is magic. Let us show you how this comes down and then flows into business and impacts accordingly. There's this thing we're trying to build. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I feel it and I sense it. And we are bringing magic through exactly what you said, Quinn, creating that space. I like when we use that term terraforming, because to a certain extent, that's what we do. We terraform an environment where this love, kindness, authenticity, vulnerability, and therefore trust, and therefore courage, and therefore innovation and creativity can express itself. Yet to come to fruition, there is one prerequisite, or let's say two. The first one is slow down. You need to slow down. You need to accept to take the time to experience this. As we call that the chocolate, right? We can talk about the chocolate, we can talk about the magic. If you don't experience it, if you don't taste it, well, you may not realize the full effect of it. So you need to slow down and accept to spend some time in a different environment. Now, it doesn't mean outside of your organization, creating a special place within the organization where you can make that experience. And at the moment, what I hear from the marketplace is faster. Faster, needs to go faster. And the AI, by the way, is getting that syndrome of going faster to a magnitude 10, 100, 1000. It's amazing. And what I heard yesterday from an AI expert was that the pressure inside AI organizations, startups, but also customers trying to implement AI is only faster, faster, faster. They don't even think anymore. They execute towards what they don't know. To the extent that this consultant was telling them, be careful, right? An AI agent doesn't work in 2 days. It's a dream. You need to educate and feed it with information for 3 to 4 months. Forget it. But people are in this illusion that faster is better. What we do, Quinn, we come and we say, whoa, you can achieve much better results if only you invest a little bit of time, a little bit, not much, but so that you start transforming the way you think, the way you feel, the way you act, the way you behave, and get that level of human relationship so that you get those amazing results. But it takes first that courage to slow down. And it takes also the second point, which is the openness to try something new. And the problem I see at the moment when I talk to some of the customers, that because they're afraid, they say it's not the time to innovate. And actually, it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. You don't have to innovate on the full spectrum. And I guess, Quinn, we come to that conclusion that we need to start with a small part of the organization. With that small part, which should be independent in nature, right? Should be an autonomous unit. We need to try something. It's like an innovation lab. And you try this. And you realize by watching this that something is magical happening, the performance increases, the relationship gets better, no more burnout, no more turnover. And you say, whoa, what's cooking here? And then you might want to expand that to a larger part of the organization. But it starts small. And I guess we have no willingness to start big. We want to start small and make it happen because we know it works. We've tested it, as you said. And because we have that double hat, right? We have the spiritual hat and the ancient tradition, and also the science and the operation hat. We have created something quite unique. I haven't seen that on the marketplace. That's why I was so happy to join Humanness, because what we are providing is unique. And we know, and I know, that this is the solution to a big part of the problems. But again, it requires from the leaders courage and the ability to say, I'm ready to slow down a bit, to create that space. And that's why we have so much to learn from this guy. That's why we have so much to learn from this guy. When Buddha said, sit down under a tree and meditate, he was slowing down. And what he found behind that slowdown is just amazing. And the companies, the corporations, being conscious organisms, have to slow down. They have to let the space for new ideas to sink in, for vision, for innovation, for intuition, to thrive. And at the moment, they run like a mad machine. It's like nobody stops. It's nobody dare to just stop and say, whoa, are we doing what we should be doing? As leaders, I always remember that story from Sir Graham from the Special Force in the UK. Back a few years ago when I was managing the salespeople and, to bring them some new way of thinking. Sir Graham was saying, listen, what we do in the army is white wall gazing. So we ask, what is white wall gazing? It's just sitting in front of the white wall and thinking about the future, thinking about the reason why you do things, because in the army, what you want is to save the life of your soldiers, because otherwise you will never get the trust from your soldiers. So you want them to be safe. And you need to think before you act. They are the opposite to action. When they act with precision, but they spend 60% every day as generals thinking about not to move if it's not needed, asking whether they do the right thing. And white wall gazing, for me, is an absolute need at the moment. It requires that leaders take the time and do not simply respond to fear, respond to this injunction that they need to get more profit for the sake of no profit, otherwise the corporation will die. Because this is, of course, important, but it's not totally true. The truth is that the company should know where it goes. People should be motivated. It should be connected to the purpose. And as you say, if you don't reconnect to the essence of the corporation, then you lose this motivation, then you lose that energetic and emotional connection to it, and you lose trust on your leaders, you lose trust in the organization, and therefore, why would you work? You just bring your brain, at best, not even your heart or your guts, you just take your brain. It's okay, I do it, and then I go back, I leave, and I will do what I'm passionate about. It's not what it should be. It's not what an organization should be, and it's not what jobs should be. At least what I love in what we do, Quinn, is that we do what we love, and we call that work. But most people work and do what they love outside because it's a nightmare in that organization. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be different.
Yeah, there's a few things just on that, the last point, and I've been talking about this quite a lot recently. A woman asked me, but if everyone became conscious, wouldn't they just leave their jobs? Or I think at least, I mean, that is what she said, but she said, wouldn't they just quit? The immediate argument to that is, well, people need to pay bills. So I don't think anyone's just immediately leaving. But there is an energetic quitting, whether it's like just disengaging, just turning up to work because, you need to pay bills, like you say. And that used to be okay to a degree. I think people subscribed to that as that being a sort of a thing. But for some reason, it's not acceptable today. It's not something that people are willing to commit to. And I wonder why that is. I think there is I think I'm not going to go into this right now. I will. I think the Boomer and Gen X generation probably have a lot to answer for at the moment. I think the resistance to perhaps spiritual consciousness, these types of ideas, there's more resistance there than there is perhaps with millennials and below. And I think while senior leaders are in the resistant camp, that will be an ongoing thing. I think as time goes on, by default, it is going to change, as depending on who's in charge. The question is, are companies willing now to be part of that transition, part of that change? But that's not really the point I wanted to make. The point I wanted to make was one's job doesn't have to be purposeful. We have to reclaim purpose. The word purpose has been bastardized across business. Purpose. People think purpose is some sort of virtue thing. So it's like virtue signaling. That in order to be purposeful, you have to be part of a cause somehow. It's just not true. I guess probably advertising has a lot to answer for here, but that's not what having purpose is about at all, because purpose on an external level is unbelievably subjective. What a cause I care about might be completely different to a cause you care about. Who gets to decide what's worthy, right? If that's what purpose is, who gets to decide that? And it's just not the case. Purpose is about values and principle, and feeling that when you turn up to work, you get to act on those things. And being, so it really doesn't matter whether it works in whether one is just doing something very manual, like say working in a warehouse and driving a forklift, right? Or is a CEO of some multinational or whatever else. If an organization has values and an individual is aware of their values, and they are able to see where those two things overlap, then one can turn up to work with purpose, because they can turn up knowing that they're part of something that aligns to their soul. The problem we have today is that individuals aren't totally aware of their values. Businesses claim to be, but most of it is just so they can put words on a wall. Very few actually live and breathe it. And there is no human energetic coherence between those values and those principles. It's all very left brain. It's all very executional. It's all very unemotional. These are our values. But there's no energetic flow, so there's no real energy created from them. But you can have that. So you can become conscious. And no, you don't have to quit your job. You can find the purpose in your job, right? No matter what it is. Our calling has been to do this, to restore human qualities to the heart of business, which sounds very worthy to some, maybe. It has been referred to as noble by others, one could argue. Right, but that's, but this is difficult, what we're doing, right? Not easy. far easier when I was, just working in advertising software sales, and you were at SAP, arguably.
I confirm, but easy doesn't mean that it feeds you. And that's what I would like to reflect on first before coming to your point. I am full at the moment with passion, with enthusiasm, with optimism. Of course, we are facing difficult times trying to convince people, and even though we don't try to convince them, we are just offering a new pathway. But when I wake up in the morning, I know why I do it. I lost that while I was working in a large corporation. And believe me, I love SAP. I think SAP was an amazing and is an amazing company. Yet, I started doubting what I was doing simply because it became too mechanical. We need those KPIs. To fill those KPIs, we need to do this. Not because it has a meaning, it's because we need X% to be reached by the end of the year. Do we know how this X% will transform into impact revenue? No. And that's what makes me smile when everyone, even CFO, asks for a return on investment. There is no one single company able to demonstrate a return on investment. It doesn't work. So I lost, and everyone I've seen...
What do you mean by that?
Because tell me who can tell you what will be the weather beyond 3 days. The weather like, okay? And it's only clouds. Now imagine a return on investment on a project on 3-year basis. Seriously. SAP will never sign a contract like this. Accenture will never. McKinsey will never. The only thing they can tell you is, okay, if you fire that amount of people, you can increase the market cap, because of course, the market will say, oh, very great to improve margin. So this is an easy thing. But look at what happened for SAP. And I don't want to pinpoint on that company because I love it. And I'm a shareholder, by the way, is that the share price goes high when they decided get rid of 8,000 people, and for very good reasons. And it dropped dramatically, which was really good. But then it dropped again 20%. Okay? Even the market says, okay, it was nice. You improved things because you said you would do that and you would get rid of big part of the cost. Fine. And then poof, it come down. Even there, your return on investment is not secure. So return on investment is an illusion for people who want to have an illusion of control, okay? From finance. Easy. Nobody will sign this up. Nobody. Even in cloud. It's not true. The second point is what you said. So if you increase in consciousness, would you leave the organization? You will leave the organization if within that organization, there is no place that resonates at your level of consciousness. What have we done in SAP? We were a group of 320 individuals interested in specific topics like life-centered design. And everyone was grouped in that environment, and SAP was okay for us to have that environment. Because SAP as an innovation company accepted to have innovation area within the company. And because it was resonating with us, and there was motivation and self-motivation and auto-leadership, we started creating a group and started talking to customers, partners, and it was resonating with us. So I believe you can actually stay in the corporation, in the organization, if you have that freedom, that space, that terraform space, where you can express yourself, behave, take risk and innovate in that area with freedom. And what I see at the moment, which is not understood by the leaders, is that they believe the company is a monolith, is a rigid structure. But we, you and me, Quinn, see that as an organism. And within that organism, there is flexibility, there is chaos, there is innovation, there is emergence, there is surprise, there is uncertainty. And everyone tries to control this, while the magic of performance, innovation, creativity comes from what you cannot control. If you take Google, they say that their best innovation comes from their coffee place where they all meet, and also from their day on Friday where they could work on their own project. Nothing controlled, nothing monitored, just gave the space to people to do what they love. And when you see this again and again and again and again, and you know it works that way, why do we always fall back in our fear factor, saying if we are afraid, we reduce, we contract, we get rid of that freedom, get rid of that mindfulness, we get rid, by the way, of all those projects of development. In SAP, there was something called intrapreneurship, where you could even try to create your own startup within SAP landscape. And this was also taken away because of the bad financial results. bad into brackets, right? We talk huge growth, but not enough for the markets. And you see that it is taking off from you, right? All those spaces of freedom, of mindfulness, of elevations, of innovations were taken away because of fear. And that's why it's interesting for us to be able to bring a different perspective to this. You don't have to take that away, right? Because it doesn't cost that much. It's not that expensive. To create the space is not expensive. And we, Quinn, in Humanness, have done something amazing, which is we help the company, the board, to reconnect to the essence of the corporation. We help people to reconnect to their own inner journey, to their own value, and we help both of them to reconnect. This is the magic through what we do. We have understood this problem from the top. We understand the problem from the bottom. We understand how to link that together so that through emergence comes the values which are real felt embodied values where people are ready and happy and proud and have a sense of belonging to that organization so that the organization becomes alive again. And this is just beautiful to watch. This is just beautiful to see deploy and come to fruition because that's alive. Most organizations, most people I talk to are in current stagnating / dying type organization because nothing happens. It's just execution, it's machine working. And I guess there is an amazing path with Humanness towards something much more dynamic, much more fun, much more joyful, much more innovative. And
what you're talking about here is faith, because the antidote to fear is always faith. And what we're asking for in order to create those environments, whether it be where there are, where one can let go of expectation, let go of ROI, let go of these types of things, it requires faith. And faith is because as soon as you're letting go of control, as soon as you're letting go of control of an outcome, you are in the realm of faith, right? Because if you are no longer controlling what the outcome is going to be, then who is, right? And whether you want to call it the universe or nature or God, it doesn't matter. You are letting go of control. Now, to do that is profound because you have to override the fear of the consequences that you think will happen if you don't control the outcome. And this is why faith is such a human quality, right? Because like you say, all true innovation emerges from the unknown. Otherwise, it's not innovation. If it's an idea that already exists, it's just copying, right? It's not innovation. If you're just doing a flavor variant, that's not innovation, right? That's just a flavor variant based on data. It's not innovation. If you really want to spark, that spark must be born of nothing. And so again, to create the environment, because this is what growth is. Part of the reason I think we are in this sort of difficult professional situation globally is that we have closed off the grounds for faith. We've closed off the grounds for true innovation. And so we're just recycling ideas, recycling product, recycling whatever. And we're just squeezing the blood out of the stone more and more until there's just really nothing left. And really what needs to happen is the whole thing just needs to be allowed. It's almost like it just needs to, like there needs to be the space created where the rules just don't exist, where one can truly just let go. And in order to do that, there needs to be faith. There needs to be courageousness. There needs to be creativity. There needs to be purpose. There needs to be passion. These are the human qualities that need to be restored. It's a little bit like restoring minerals to the soil. We've sucked it all out. It's not healthy, the ecosystem anymore. We have to restore the goodness to the ecosystem. And what will be the byproduct of a healthy ecosystem? Growth. Always growth. That's what a healthy ecosystem does. And
Hmm. And when I listen to you, Quinn, internally I'm smiling because I'm extremely joyful about this, because I see the path, I see the way, and I see that it can be done. It can be done. And it's not so complex to be done. It's just for people to be willing to listen.
Open-mindedness.
Open-mindedness. It takes a little bit of a vision, a little bit of a faith, a little bit of a courage to start saying, yes, it can be done. And it is not complex. It is not complicated. It's not complex. Something that can happen very organically. And again, it's not painful. and that's what I believe in, is that people do not like pain. When you come with those big transformation projects, Quinn, again, in my past life, we had so many big transformation projects. When I was talking to the market units or to the countries, they were saying, oh, it's on top. It's on top of what? It's on top of our day-to-day activities. So mentally, by default, our brain is saying, oh, there is execution day-to-day, and there is innovation and transformation. It doesn't match, right? It's, oh, I need to do something on top. What we are saying is not this. We say, listen, we just create a space for people to start doing things differently, behaving differently on their day-to-day activities. It's not innovation on top and you need to do something on top. We say, just do differently what you're doing every day, and do it from a place of human qualities, of that courage and trust and vulnerability and openness and authenticity. And it's not, we don't come with a transformation program. It's not yet another initiative. It's a way of being. It's a DNA shift. DNA shift is not difficult. It's a DNA shift. It's a belief shift. It's not complex. You believe something happens to you, you believe something else. Did it hurt? Not necessarily. It's easy. Goes through. That's what we do. And I guess that's what we need to bring across through this discussion, through podcasts, through conversations, that it is not painful, it's not complicated, and it doesn't take effort. It's not effortful. It's the opposite, in fact. But we have been trained, we have been educated, through competition at school, competition in business, and competition everywhere, that it needs to be painful. No pain, no gain, right? This is not true anymore. We know the latest research shows that it is not true. You can have a psychologically safe environment that helps growing, that thrives, as you said. Sound environment, ecosystem will actually thrive. We know it. We know it's not true. And yet we then need to tell people, especially leaders, it is possible. We have found a way. It is possible. Just try it. It's a chocolate.
I think that, when in the very early days of Humanness, I had the very, very big vision with regards to the scale of the transformation of the journeys that I wanted to go on. And, we have brought this down to a very digestible level, teams and business units to experience, and because it's only after one experiences the magic that it will make sense. And I guess that is our call to those brave enough, those willing, or as we were just saying, open-minded, to try to experience. We have a saying in 12-step recovery that we call it's a very simple program for very complicated people.
That's so true. It's exactly what it is.
And the Humanness journey, the Humanness product is very similar. It's a very simple process, very complicated organizations.
Einstein once said, simple but not simpler. And I guess I would like to mention that on that podcast, we have put a lot of thinking, left brain on this one, behind the process. The process is different because it understands human energy, emotions, values, and it understands the principle of emergence. So it is different from what I've seen on the marketplace at the moment. But I want to mention and stress the fact that because of who we are and the background we have, it is a process. And the process goes down to the last phase that we call prototyping, which I'm fascinated about, because it is at the point where the processes themselves within the organization are reconnected to the values. And nobody at the moment I have seen in any corporations have done this. They have values, as you said, put somewhere on the marketing table. And then they have a group called operations that create processes. Then you have a group called human resources doing recruitment, firing, and part of training. And all those people somehow communicate, but not too much. So there is no unity, there is no unification, there is no coherence between those elements. It's actually even worse. It's insider competition. What we've done, which is totally different, we took the process so far that we started thinking how to integrate processes and behaviors in collaboration or cooperation with the values that have emerged and with the essence of the company and the inner journey of people. That level of sophistication, even though it looks simple, is extremely powerful. And I want to mention that because I spend lots of time on processes, and I love processes, by the way, even though I not always follow them. But we have created a process that doesn't have a very formal shape. It's very flexible inside the process. But the logic, the connecting points, the intelligence, and I use that term in terms of wisdom, within that process is extremely rich. And I guess we have some ingredients that people can only realize when they test it. Because we have magical elements in there. And I guess, again, we have cracked the code of something quite powerful in terms of transformation and performance. Not transformation for the sake of, we do transformation. No. Transforming to perform sustainably, taking care of the humans within the equation. And I guess we have come to something simple, I would even say beautiful, by its simplicity, yet with a level of depth and a power of transformation, which is big. And we've seen that recently with our customer, right? It's deep.
I love that, man. And I think it might even be a nice place to close this episode on. Unless there's anything else you want to.
No, it was really nice talking to you, Quinn.
It is, brother. But that's it. It's just a space for us to talk humanness. Like I think we have created something beautiful. I think we should do some more episodes as we see things, as we there's lots and lots more to talk about with all of this, and I think we do have a duty of care to share with anyone who does want to hear. It's not forget. As much as I welcome any gain it has in developing the business, I think we do have a duty of care to share what we're seeing and what we're thinking, what we're feeling. So it's lovely to do this with you. And if anyone has any thoughts, any questions, please reach out to us. You can find our emails in the details, or follow us on LinkedIn, send us a message. Just be good to hear from anyone about anything. Anyone who wants to sort of band together and join the mission. Anyone who's curious, we would love to hear from you. Thanks a lot. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Learning How to Live. If this sparked something for you, share it, subscribe, and remember, you don't have to escape your life. You can build one worth staying for.